was 50 when I bought the leather chair. It was dark brown, reclined smooth, and came with a price tag that made me hesitate for a second. But I still signed the receipt with a quiet pride, as if that chair was proof that I had made it. I remember thinking, this is what success looks like, the kind of success you can sink into after a long day. A throne in the modest kingdom I built from years of work, compromise, and early mornings that bled into late nights. But you know what? That chair is still in the corner of my old study, covered in dust, the leather cracked from years of sun and silence. No one sits there now, not even me. And that's the thing about certain triumphs at 50, they look like milestones, but often they're just distractions. Pretty distractions, expensive distractions, but distractions nonetheless. At 50, I was chasing comfort. Not the kind that warms your soul, but the kind you buy in installments. I mistook convenience for peace. I believed that if my bed was softer, my car newer, and my watch heavier, then somehow I'd feel lighter. But peace doesn't come from padded chairs or German engines. It doesn't care about thread count or tech specs. Comes quietly, like rain. And at 50, I hadn't yet learned how to sit still long enough to hear it. I kept chasing more recognition, more nods across boardroom tables, more people clapping when I entered the room. I wanted to matter not just to my family or friends, but to everyone. I mistook visibility for value. I'd walk into a meeting and drop facts like grenades, waiting for the room to be impressed. I said yes to speaking engagements not because I loved to speak, but because I loved being asked. I wanted to be wanted. But applause is a strange kind of echo, loud in the moment, but it fades quickly. And when it fades, you're left wondering if you said anything real, or just something loud. At 50, I thought legacy was about what people would remember me for. At 80, I see it's about what people feel safe enough to tell me now. Big difference. I chased success with the urgency of someone trying to outrun regret. I worked harder than anyone else, not always out of passion, but out of fear. Fear that if I slowed down, everything would crumble, that I would lose relevance, that someone younger, sharper, hungrier would take my place. And maybe someone did, but that's not the tragedy. The tragedy is that in chasing what I thought was purpose, I forgot to pause long enough to feel joy. Not just achievement, but joy. That quiet satisfaction that sneaks into your chest when you're sitting beside your child and they're not saying anything, but you both feel safe in the silence. I didn't have many of those moments back then. I was too busy making sure my inbox was at zero, that my reputation was intact, that no one ever saw me confused, or tired, or God forbid, vulnerable. I wore resilience like armor, and it worked, for a while. But armor is heavy, and over time it wears you down. Not all at once. Just enough to make you tired in places you didn't know could be tired. It took me years to realize that most of the things I chased were actually shields, ways to avoid being seen fully. Because what if they didn't like what they saw? Now, from 80, I see the irony. The people who truly mattered never cared about my titles. They didn't care about my chair or my car or the watch I wore to dinner. They just wanted me to be there, to look them in the eye when they spoke, to laugh, really laugh, not just nod and check my phone, to let them see the parts of me that weren't polished. And I missed so many chances to do that. I missed birthdays, not because I forgot, but because I had deadlines. I missed lazy Sunday breakfasts because I was catching up on emails. I missed the chance to let my kids see me fail, really fail, so they'd know that it's okay. You can't go back and fix those moments, but you can talk about them. And maybe someone younger is listening right now, standing in their own fancy kitchen, holding a steaming mug and wondering why the coffee doesn't quite warm them like it used to. Maybe they're starting to feel that quiet ache, not in their bones but in their days, a sense that they're winning the wrong race. If that's you, stay with me. There's more I want to say. There was a moment around 53 or so when I caught my own reflection in a hotel window. I just finished a speech in a city I didn't know, to a room full of people whose names I wouldn't remember by morning. The applause had been kind. The dinner afterward was polished. But standing there, alone in the glass, I looked empty. Not tired, not sad, just hollow. It's hard to explain unless you felt it, That strange hollowness that comes not from losing, but from winning things that never really fed you. That night, I poured myself a drink in the minibar. Something expensive, aged, like I thought I was, and sat in silence. No emails, no phone calls, just me and a quiet that felt too honest. And in that moment, I realized I had spent years chasing being impressive, when all I ever wanted was to feel connected. I thought if I built enough, achieved enough, proved enough, then I'd finally feel close to people. But the higher I climbed, the more distant I became. Funny, isn't it? I thought I needed a bigger house to gather more people. But somehow the halls got quieter. The living room stayed clean because no one sat there long enough to make a mess. I thought success would make me magnetic. Instead, it made people careful around me. Polite, respectful, but rarely real. I didn't know how to say, "I'm lonely." That wasn't in the vocabulary of a man who wore confidence like a suit. Instead, I hosted parties and kept the music loud. I poured the drinks, asked the questions, played the generous host. And somehow, I'd go to bed feeling like the only one who didn't belong. Connection isn't built through charm or generosity. It's built through presence and vulnerability. And I had neither to spare back then. I was busy chasing control. I wanted to shape everything, my reputation, my future, my children's future. I managed people like chess pieces, believing if I just planned enough, predicted enough, no one would ever fall. But life doesn't work that way. People fall. Plans change. And no amount of strategy will protect you from a broken heart or a phone call in the middle of the night. I remember the first time one of my kids cried in front of me. Really cried. They were in their 20s by then. And I realized, with a kind of ache I can still feel, that they'd never come to me sooner, because I'd spent decades being strong instead of being soft. They didn't need my solutions. They needed my arms. And by the time I figured that out, they'd learned to cry elsewhere. That's something no one warns you about, that being the reliable one, the fixer, the unshakable, comes at a cost. People will admire you, sure, but they won't confide in you. Not deeply. Not when it matters most. I thought I was protecting them, from my doubts, my fears, my confusion. But all I was doing was building a wall between us. And walls, even beautiful ones, are still barriers. Looking back, I chased the image of the perfect man. Dependable, successful, emotionally contained. The kind of man people look up to. But I'd give anything now to go back and be the kind of man people feel safe beside. I didn't know that then. At 50, I still thought people loved me more when I was impressive. At 80, I know they love me more when I'm honest. Not everyone, but the ones who matter. And that's enough. If you're still here, leave me a comment. Tell me what you're chasing right now and why. I'd really love to know. I once believed urgency was a virtue. There was always something to get to, somewhere to be, someone waiting. I walked fast, talked fast, thought 3 steps ahead of every conversation. Time was money, and I spent it like I was afraid of running out. Only now do I realize I was spending it wrong. At 50, I filled my calendar to the edges. Appointments, lunches, flights, meetings, even vacations had agendas. There was never space for nothing, and nothing, as I've learned too late, is sacred. You see, nothing is where you hear birds again, where you sit beside someone without checking the clock, where your child tells you a story they've told before but you listen anyway, because you finally understood the story was never the point. Slowness, I never trusted it. Felt like weakness, like falling behind. But here at 80, I envy it. The men who moved slowly, who savored their meals, who paused before answering. I used to mistake their pace for passivity. Now I see it was wisdom in motion. I chased speed, and in doing so, I missed things. Little things, big things, things that don't come back. I missed the way my daughter used to hum to herself when she painted. I missed the way my wife always touched my shoulder when she passed behind me in the kitchen. I missed the way light filtered through our old dining room curtains in late afternoon, turning the whole room gold. No one tells you to slow down until it's too late to catch what's already passed. I was so focused on building a life that looked good, I forgot to feel the life I was in. And maybe that's the deepest loss of all. Not the things we never had, but the things we had right in front of us and didn't notice. I chased being needed. That's a quieter one. But oh, it was real. I made myself indispensable. At work, at home, even among friends. I solved things before they became problems. I offered help before anyone asked. And I wore the exhaustion that came with it like a badge. I told myself it was generosity. Maybe it was. But underneath, if I'm honest, there was something else. Fear. Fear that if I wasn't needed, I wouldn't be loved. I tied my worth to being useful, which sounds noble until you realize that the moment you stop being useful, you feel invisible. And when age comes, as it always does, it strips you of usefulness first. Your hands shake a little. Your thoughts take longer. People stop asking for your input. They explain things you already know. And suddenly, you're not the helper anymore, you're the one who needs help. I wasn't ready for that shift. I didn't know how to receive. I didn't know how to sit in a room and offer nothing but presence. I didn't know how to be loved without earning it. Still learning even now. But back then, I kept giving and giving, hoping someone would notice when I started to run dry. Most didn't, because I was so good at hiding the cost. You can't blame them. When your whole life has been about showing up strong, people assume you're fine. And sometimes you believe it yourself, right up until the silence gets too loud. There's one more thing I chased that haunts me quietly. I chased certainty. About the world. About right and wrong. About what a good life looked like. I liked answers, clean, confident, easy to recite. I avoided questions that made me feel small or unsure. I thought faith meant knowing. Now I think it means wondering and walking forward anyway. I used to scoff at mystery. Now I find it sacred. The older I get, the more I trust questions over conclusions. The more I value people who say, I don't know, and mean it. The more I realize that the best things in life, love, forgiveness, grace, are never formulas. They're invitations. At 50, I wanted to be right. At 80, I want to be real. I used to keep score. Not in a petty way, at least not that I'd admit. But in quiet corners of my mind, I did. Who called who last? Who showed up? Who said thank you? Who forgot? It wasn't about revenge, no, nothing that sharp. It was more of a ledger, a running tally of how much I was giving versus how much I felt was returned. And when the numbers didn't balance, I'd feel something sour rise up in me. I get quiet, withdraw, maybe even feel a little righteous in my disappointment. Took me decades to understand what I was really chasing. Fairness. At 50, I believed relationships were transactional. I show up for you, you show up for me. I make time for your needs, you make time for mine. Felt noble, even mature, balanced. But love doesn't work like that. Not the kind that matters. The love that's worth growing old with is uneven, irrational, sometimes beautifully lopsided. It gives without a stopwatch. It listens without waiting for its turn to speak. It shows up even when the other person doesn't know they need it. Some of the people I loved most, they never said thank you. Not once. But they loved me in their own clumsy, silent ways. A meal reheated without asking. A hand on my back during a hard day. A look across the room that said, I see you. Even when I didn't want to be seen. If I'd spent less time measuring and more time noticing, maybe I would have seen those things sooner. I chased fairness. What I should have chased was understanding. There's this quiet pressure at 50 to prove you've figured it all out. That your marriage works. That your career is thriving. That your children reflect the love you gave them. It's a dangerous lie, this belief that the state of our lives is proof of our worth. My marriage, it wasn't perfect. We had seasons we barely spoke. Times we sat beside each other on the couch with miles between us. We fought, sometimes bitterly. We forgave, sometimes clumsily. But we stayed. Not out of obligation. Not for appearances. We stayed because something inside both of us whispered, this is worth it. Even when everything else screamed otherwise. At 50, I thought love was the feeling that came easy. At 80, I know it's the decision that returns quietly, day after day. And my children, well, they didn't always turn out the way I imagined. They made choices that confused me, paths I wouldn't have chosen. But they are kind. and they're trying. And more than once, they've taught me how to love better, not with lectures but with how they live. It humbles you when your children become your teachers. I chased pride for a long time, wanted to be seen as a man who raised good people, who built something lasting. But life is messier than that. People are messier than that. I see now that I wasn't called to build perfect outcomes. I was called to love imperfect people, beginning with myself. There's something else I chased, though I didn't have the words for it then. I chased permanence. I thought if I could just get the right house, the right career title, the right rhythm to my days, then it would all stay. That I could plant something solid, unshakable. That change was the enemy. But nothing stays. The kids leave. The house gets sold. The knees go. The neighborhood shifts. The photos fade. And yet, not everything is lost. Because what remains isn't what I built. It's what I gave away. The meals cooked. The letters written. The quiet forgiveness offered when no one asked. The time I sat beside a friend in a hospital waiting room and said nothing at all. Those things, they outlived the trophies, the promotions, the polished Christmas cards. At 50, I was busy trying to hold everything in place. At 80, I opened my hands a lot more. And somehow, in letting go, I found what's most worth holding. There's an old tree behind my house. It's crooked, not in the poetic way, but truly crooked. Storms pulled it sideways years ago, and it never quite recovered. But it kept growing toward the light, like all living things do. A little slower now, a little quieter, but still alive. Some mornings, I sit beside it with my tea and think, maybe I've grown like that too. Bent in places, weathered, but still reaching for something soft and warm. I used to think wisdom came in answers. Now I think it comes in noticing. Noticing what you ignored before. Noticing the way your spouse breathes beside you in sleep. Noticing how long the wind holds in the branches before it lets go. Noticing how your hands look more like your father's than they used to. And noticing what no longer matters. Titles don't matter. The email signatures. The corner office. The applause from people who don't know your middle name. What matters is whether your grandchildren want to crawl into your lap without being asked. Whether your friends still call you when they're scared. Whether someone trusts you enough to cry in front of you. At 50, I chased admiration. At 80, I crave intimacy. Not the romantic kind, though that has its place, but the kind where someone sits beside you, doesn't say much, but you both know you are not alone. That kind of closeness, I didn't know how to seek it back then. I thought it came from being interesting, impressive. Turns out it comes from being kind, and a little bit soft, and not pretending to be more than you are. I spent too long trying to prove I was enough. Now I know you never have to prove that to the people who truly love you. They knew it before you ever did. And here's the last thing I'll say. What I chased the most was time. I didn't call it that, of course. I called it productivity, drive, ambition. But really, I was trying to cheat the clock, to get more out of the day than it was offering, to stretch my life just a little further, even if it meant filling it too full. I lived like life was a mountain I could climb if I just worked hard enough. But life isn't a mountain. It's a garden. And gardens aren't conquered. They're tended. You wake up, you water what matters, you pull a few weeds, and you sit in the shade when you're tired. Some things bloom. Some don't. You don't take it personally. You just keep tending. At 50, I wanted to master my life. At 80, I just want to be present for it. So if you're somewhere in the middle, maybe running, maybe striving, maybe wondering why it still feels empty, I won't tell you to stop chasing. But I will ask you this, what's chasing you back? Because if it doesn't return in peace, in laughter, in love, maybe it's not worth the sprint. Maybe the chair you already sit in is enough. Maybe the people who see you as you are enough. Maybe you are enough. And if you'd like to return, sometime down the road, you know where to find me. This space doesn't go anywhere. I'll be here, still tending, still watching that crooked tree grow.